Welcome to a special offering by Conversations with a Wounded Healer, the Burnt Out Practice Owner. This series will discuss the current state of group practice ownership, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We'll hear current and former practice owners' tales of glory and woe as we attempt to answer the ultimate question, why do we do this to ourselves? And we want to hear from you too. What have been your biggest moments of struggle or triumph? What are questions you want us to explore? I'm your host, Sarah Bueno. I owned and operated my practice, Head Heart Therapy, for 10 years before selling in 2023. Ownership was an equally grueling and rewarding experience for me, and I now spend my time helping current practice owners find balance for themselves. Join us between releases of Conversations with a Wounded Healer for this special series. Hello, welcome to the Burnt Out Practice Owner. So very happy to have you here today. How you doing? How's your heart? What's going on in the world? I know there's a lot happening, so thank you for being here today. Thank you for taking time out of your existential dread to join me. Much appreciated. Before I get to today's guest, I wanted to share that, as I said in the intro, I really do want to hear from you. I want to hear from you either via Instagram at headheartbiztherapy or by email, sarah@headheartbiztherapy.com. I want to hear what you're digging about the show. I want to hear if there are topics that you want to discuss. I just want to hear whatever you have to say. I mean, say it. It's cool. And hopefully we'll do something about it on the show. You could also rate and review the podcast by going to ratethispodcast.com/woundedhealer. You can share with a friend, or you can hire me. If you're a group practice owner, I love to work with people who really want to lead with their hearts and be in balance with their business ownership and their real lives. Because of course, work is not real life. I don't know. Anyway, so I have some really exciting stuff coming up. I am working behind the scenes. I'm not going to tell you exactly what it is just yet, but I really, really, really want to make a positive contribution to the world of group practice. And part of why I want to do that is related to today's guest. I have told you in all of the episodes probably how many mistakes I made as a practice owner. And what I'm trying to create is hopefully going to be a space where I'm practicing living amends and supporting both employees and practice owners to come together for the greater good. So stay tuned. I'll let you know soon when that is all happening. So now on to today's guest. This episode with Jenna Alfaro was really painful, truthfully. And it's painful because Jenna is a former employee of mine who I mean, honestly, I have so many regrets about things that transpired between myself and employees at various stages of practice ownership. And I'm lucky enough that Jenna was able to hold compassion for me as well. And she and I didn't have a bad ending, which is something that I'm extraordinarily grateful for. So I reached out to Jenna because I'm realizing that the whole business of practice ownership, I can't just be talking to the employers. I can't just be talking to practice owners because there's stuff that we miss. We have huge blind spots when we're business owners because we're so worried about making sure, we can keep the roof over everyone's heads, make sure that we're, paying people on time, all that sort of stuff, that there's a lot of things that we miss. And I feel really extraordinarily grateful that Jenna was willing to come on the show and share some of those things with me and with you. So if you're a practice owner listening to this, honestly, I hope it hurts your heart too, because I am going to make a guess that there is not one practice owner out there who has never harmed an employee. And I say that not because I assume that you and I are all awful people, but because this is how it is to be human. This is what happens when we start signing people's paychecks. When there's money involved, that means there's a power differential, and we are always going to cause harm. And part of being in right relationship with power is recognizing that we're going to cause harm and being willing to make a repair. So if you're a practice owner, I hope this hurts you as much as it hurt me. And if you're an employee, I hope that this is healing for you in some way. You know, it's funny. I have these fantasies of being able to reconcile with some of the employees that I harmed along the way. And I hope that for employees out there, this might fulfill your fantasy too of having your employer, your past employer, apologize to you for all the things that they have done. So I may not be able to reconcile with every single employee I harmed along the way, but I am eternally grateful to Jenna for giving me the opportunity to apologize to her in front of all of you. So my specialty is vulnerability, and you're getting it all here, unfiltered, and I was going to say unedited, but this is a very well edited podcast. But you are getting my actual responses. So let me tell you a little bit more about Jenna. Jenna Alfaro is a licensed clinical social worker and certified addictions counselor. She specializes in trauma, substance abuse, and psychotic disorders. Jenna is passionate about shifting the pulse of mental health care to a holistic model of wellness. So please enjoy, painfully or not, this conversation with Jenna Alfaro. Are you a therapist stepping into a leadership role for the first time? Or maybe you've been in a leadership position for a while, but you're bumping up against new struggles. It's a transformative journey and one that can be deeply rewarding, but also filled with unique challenges. Many therapists find themselves in leadership positions because of their exceptional therapeutic skills. Yet leading, supervising, or managing others requires a whole new set of competencies not typically covered in graduate school. Our Authentic Leaders group is here to help you become the authentic and wholehearted leader you aspire to be. And we believe that the journey is best undertaken with the guidance of experienced mentors alongside fellow learners. The next cohort of Authentic Leaders will run November 2024 through June 2025, meeting once monthly on Fridays for 90 minutes. We'll also have some additional opportunities for connection and support along the way. Join me in this journey of self-discovery and leadership mastery, where you'll enhance your leadership skills and forge meaningful connections with fellow therapists committed to their own growth and the betterment of the therapy field. www.headheartbiztherapy.com/authentic-leaders-group. Jenna, welcome to the Burnt Out Practice Owner.
Hi, happy to be here.
Yay. And you're not even a practice owner, but you're here for a very special reason today.
Yes, I am.
Which we'll talk about shortly. But first, do you want to introduce yourself, who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Jenna Alfaro. I am a licensed clinical social worker and a certified alcohol and drug counselor in the state of Illinois.
Yeah. And we met when you were did you take 2 of my classes? Was it 2 back to back?
3.
Oh, you took all 3 with me. So yeah, at Loyola, were you a little baby social worker? And I was a little baby teacher because that was pretty early in my teaching career. And right away, I saw that you were a star.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You definitely influenced that.
Oh, well, I didn't influence your stardom, but maybe influence your career a little bit. Sure, I'll take that.
Fair enough.
Okay. So the reason I invited you here to the Burnt Out Practice Owner, even though you are not a practice owner, is because you were an employee of mine, and you were an employee of mine at my worst. That was the time in my practice ownership when I was the least, well, no, I've been less healthy in other iterations, but where my business owning skills were at their worst, where I had taken on more than I had ever taken on in my life. And I failed. I failed tremendously. And I wanted an opportunity to let other practice owners hear like what went wrong from your end, from the employee end, because I think that's really important to hear. And then I also think you wanted to share your own experience of mistakes that you've made too, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, where do you want to start? Hit me.
I guess we could start at the beginning.
Yeah.
So coming out of grad school, working for you was one of my very first real social work jobs. And so, when you finish grad school, they tell you expect to go into the field and you're not going to make any money for a very long time. And so I did that. I came out of grad school. I expected to make no money. And then you called me and we talked and you asked me to join your practice. And that was not the experience of making no money. And so I jumped right in and I said yes. And I don't think I quite knew what that would look like for me. And to be fair, part of that is that when you come out of grad school as a baby social worker, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And you don't know what you're not good at yet.
Right.
And so I had come from internships that had challenged me. And so I felt like I was ready. But then the private practice world was something where you have all of this freedom and I didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And so because with private practice, you have to build your own clientele and start that from the ground up. I didn't know where to start. And I very much felt like I was kind of floating on an island of, I have to work somewhere else to make money right now, but I also want to be good at this. And I don't know what being good at this looks like yet. And so we had supervision. You were great about providing that, but supervision was with all of these really amazing clinicians who knew what they were doing
Mm-hmm.
and were making life-changing differences for people and walking along people on their journey. And while I wanted to do that, I don't think I knew how yet. And so I don't know that I would recommend jumping into private practice before you've figured out who you are as a social worker outside of writing papers.
Yeah.
And so I think I just needed more guidance in how do I navigate this? Like, I don't have a worksheet that tells me how to be a good social worker. And
Right.
people who have insurance and are visiting private practices don't want to do worksheets.
Right.
And so I felt like I had no boundaries and I didn't necessarily know what was okay, what wasn't okay, and there wasn't a roadmap to get there.
Right. And honestly, as you're talking about this, I have a pit in my stomach because from the business ownership lens that I have now, I'm like, onboarding was terrible because there was no onboarding at that time. I didn't provide any structure for you. There wasn't enough supervision. And then a question coming up around this, because I remember when you and I collectively decided that this was no longer a good fit for you, but that was only after I had sort of recognized that you weren't able to meet the quote unquote standards that we had in private practice. What kept you from coming to me and saying, I need more help?
So, a couple things. One, you were really busy. And I knew you were really busy. And so I didn't really see you to be able to have that conversation. And then two, I remember having a client and I had never experienced someone who was truly having a mental health crisis before. And that burned me out really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I knew what crisis intervention looked like. I knew what I needed to do, but I didn't feel like I had the support to do my job at that time. And I didn't know like what the boundaries were as a new social worker of how do I navigate somebody who I don't think is getting enough support on this level of care, but doesn't want to do anything about it.
Yeah.
And so you and I had a conversation about that. And that's when I started to pump the brakes. But instead of coming to you and telling you I feel like I'm flailing, I just stopped taking on new clients and started pouring myself into other things that I knew that I was doing better at because I didn't want to feel like I was failing. And I didn't want to feel like I was failing you because we had a relationship before I started working for you
Mm-hmm.
that I didn't want to lose by being like, this isn't for me.
Right, right. So there was a fear that I would be disappointed in you?
Very much so. And that I was
Yeah.
disappointed in myself and I would have had to acknowledge that. And that's a hard thing for anybody, but especially for somebody who has no experience outside of school and now has this job that's encompassing so much while also maintaining another job that paid my bills.
Right, right. And how long was it? Like a year?
Not quite.
Not even a year.
So no, I finished grad school in May. I think we started onboarding in August, and then right around February, I think we said that it wasn't working.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel so sick to my stomach. It's funny. I've said this before. I can't remember if I've said on this podcast, but you know how people sometimes when they're feeling bad about themselves will go like look up their exes and stalk them on social media. I do that for my employees because that's how I torture myself. And I have such deep regret for how I failed you, how I failed everybody that was working for me at that time, but specifically you, because I cared so much about you. And like I told you, when I first met you in class, I knew you were a star. So I saw that you had everything in you.
I didn't expect emotions right now.
Oh, are you feeling feelings?
I am feeling feelings.
What's coming up?
I don't think I've ever talked about this before. Like,
Yeah.
shame is deep, and I definitely felt ashamed of that part of my career,
Mm,
and not asking for help and feeling like I was on an island. But I don't think I ever processed through what that meant for me
mm,
and how I compensated for it.
mm. Well, what's it like for you to hear me say how much I regret failing you?
I think it's powerful because I don't think I felt like you failed me. I felt like I failed you.
No way, dude. I mean, sure, you can think that, but like one of the things I've been learning, I've been training in this organization called the Right Use of Power, and they talk about the 150% principle of when you are a person in a leadership position, you have 150% responsibility, and then the other person has 100%. And obviously, like numbers, it doesn't add up. But the point is, I was the one who was supposed to know better, and I didn't, and I failed. And because if you would have come to me, like now, if somebody comes to me fresh out of grad school, I say, please get a job somewhere else. There are a handful of people that it works out really well, but it's generally really, really challenging. And when I talk to other group practice owners who hire people right out of school, everybody says the same thing. And it's funny because there are a lot of people with a lot of ego who will be like, why are you saying I can't do this? But like, you had all of the raw talent, you had all of the great internship experiences. You did excellently in school, so you knew all the theory. Even with all of that, like all the recipe for success, it wasn't the right time.
No, it wasn't. And what's funny is I needed to learn. I don't think I needed to learn anything other than how to trust myself and my gut.
Yeah.
Because now I work with people with chronic mental health issues and co occurring mental and physical health issues on a much more intense level, and
Mhm.
it doesn't scare me.
Right.
I can jump in and I'm confident that I can do crisis de escalation or that I can help other social workers do crisis de escalation and training, but I definitely didn't feel like I could do it then.
Yeah.
I needed experience.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right because that's what I hear from other newer therapists is that self-trust isn't there. And for some other folks that we've hired straight out of grad school, that's part of what I see not working out is because like we can't like after you, I ended up completely changing everything and realized, oh, wait, I'm a business owner and I have a responsibility to these people. So once we started to like really build an onboarding program and all of that sort of stuff and gave everybody what they needed, some people still don't make it. And it's because of that confidence piece. It's because like we can give you the recipe, we can give you the ingredients, but we can't bake the cake.
And that's fair. But I think I was missing a couple eggs in the process.
I mean, sure, but it's just having had the experiences because like the first time that you dealt with somebody, in a let's say a psychotic break, right? The first time you did that is the first time you did that and you don't have all the eggs, but at least you had a supervisor there probably that you could pull in and be like, "Hey, help. What do we do here?" And that I mean, having those experiences and knowing that you can make it through, of course, is what builds your confidence. But I don't know that you have anything different now other than experience.
No,
Yeah, because you're a star.
well, I appreciate that. I'm a star building other stars. That's the goal, right?
Right, exactly. I mean, that's what I feel about teaching is I had one of the best internship supervisors for my second internship and in that moment I was like I am going to give this back to others and then I had a great supervisor in my first job. So I'm going to give this to others, which is I think another reason why it makes me so sick to my stomach to hear you say how much more you needed from me and I wasn't there because that's all I really want, you know, is to foster the growth of other clinicians.
And to be fair, I will say like, you did foster my growth in a sense of you taught all of my substance abuse courses and you really allowed me to dig into what does it mean to work with people who struggle with addiction? What does it mean to heal? And those are skills that I don't think I'd have if I hadn't taken classes and worked with you. And even now, you're still in a corner. If I send you a message and I'm like, I don't know what to do, you're there to help me. And in a way, working for you did help me. It taught me how to advocate for myself. It taught me that
Mhm.
it's okay to say that this isn't the right fit at the right time.
Yeah.
And it also helped me to understand that, like, sometimes you struggle in life and sometimes we're not the best versions of ourselves for our clients, and
Yeah.
we have to be okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I'm guessing that as a mother of 2 children under what? Under 4?
Under 3.
Under 3. Yeah. So, I mean, do you want to talk about that a little bit too? Because I'm guessing that it might be good you learned that lesson before you became a mom.
For sure. So I am a gentle parent. I'm a millennial. Of course, I'm a gentle parent and I'm a social worker. So my children are social worked. My
Aw.
daughter will tell you how she feels before she'll tell you what she wants.
Aw.
And I'm okay with that, but I also try to make space for that. I
Yeah.
try to pay attention to how she's feeling and what she's looking for. And in my work, I try and pay attention to how others feel and what they're looking for. And knowing that I, as a full grown adult, could not express what I needed and how I felt.
Yeah.
I watch for that with my kids. I watch for that with others because there is shame around saying, like, I need more than what I'm getting right now. And we're in the midst of potty training. And so we're experiencing that all the time here because let me tell you, she gets embarrassed. And one day she's going to grow up and see that her mom talked about her potty training on a podcast. And that's just going to add to it. But there's a lot of grace and a lot of forced positivity and calmness because I know that if I don't keep my cool and maintain the ship, then how do I expect someone who doesn't know what they're doing to do it?
Right.
So,
Well, it's interesting because I interviewed somebody else about the parallels of parenting and being a therapist. And I'll say to you what I said to her is that you are making a choice. It doesn't force you. Parenthood does not force you to be a better person. I can tell you that for sure based on my parents, my experience with my parents. I think you making a choice to be the type of parent that you really want to be for your kiddos can, like, if you allow it to change you, if you allow it to help you grow, it does. But you have to make that choice. And so I just want to give you a little bit more agency with that you are choosing this.
I do. And I try and that's a choice we make every day, right? Like to be better, to do better. And it's not easy because children are challenging, more challenging than any client I've ever had because you can't walk away from it and say, okay, what do I do?
Right.
You're in it. But it's also rewarding and it does teach so much about who you are and what you value. And then you get to see that demonstrated in the life of someone else. Like every time my daughter tells somebody, you feel sad or you feel happy, I know that I'm doing something right because she's 2 and can identify things that some adults can't.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really beautiful.
There's a lot of pride there and a lot of fear.
Yeah. Well, and it's making me think about rift and repair and that process you go through as a parent, as a therapist, and I'm thinking about it as a boss. And like I said, one of my biggest regrets is the harm that I caused for many of my employees. And I had a lot of bad endings, and you were not one of them. And I've had a handful of good endings, probably more bad endings than good. And I guess I'm just curious what you think it was that made you want to stay connected to me rather than blame me completely.
I think it's a couple things. I did a lot of self-reflection as we were going through the termination process. And so I knew what was mine to own. And I knew that if I had come to you and said, I feel like I'm failing, you would have done something.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that we had a relationship prior to me working for you. And that was a big part of it is you were my teacher, you were a mentor, you were someone I trusted. And so I also saw that you were overwhelmed and stressed. And so there's a yin and a yang to that, right? Like I needed to own what was my fault and you owned what you needed to own. And I still valued you as a person.
And it's interesting because I'm thinking about, because especially when we bring in the power piece, you were always in a down power position to me, right? So like as a student, you were in a down power position, but the things that were different were it was not your paycheck on the line and you were getting A's, right? So like ostensibly you were getting what you wanted from me in that way. And I was giving you positive feedback. Do you think like for folks who, and this is not just about my employees, but this happens all the time. Like I'm supporting a lot of people actually with bad endings that they're going through with their staff right now. Do you think it's the money that like makes it harder to, I guess, give grace to a boss? Because you've also had bad bosses in the past, which we don't need to get into, but what do you think?
I think money is part of it, right? I also think that the relationship and the boundaries that you set from the beginning play a part in what that role will look like. I felt like I had open communication with you while I didn't take advantage of it and neither one of us was utilizing it. There was a method of communication there if I needed it. And so I think on my end, had I not felt like I could talk to you and I had just harbored those feelings, it would have impacted me more. I
Mm,
also think that yes, you were an authority for me. You had more power than I did, but I had seen you utilize that power to help me in the past. And so
mm.
I had never had a place where there was this resentment or this negative energy because I knew you had been on my side.
I'm just sort of conceptualizing like, what is it that bosses can do? What can practice owners do to try to foster that? And again, I think it's experience, right? Like, you can only trust someone as far as they've shown you can trust them. And we happen to have 3 semesters of trust built up before you ended up working for me. And so, you knowing this person is a good person, this person cares about me, this person is also owning their failure makes it a little bit safer, maybe?
It did feel safer. And yes, you were my teacher, but you also walked through difficult roles in my internships with me. You were someone I could go to talk to about those things. And so I think that having like bosses who have an open door, at least in my experience, when I have a supervisor that I feel like I could go to with my problems, it makes having difficult conversations easier because it doesn't feel like it's one-sided or
Right.
punitive.
Yeah.
It feels like there's mutual trust there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you don't have to give specifics about specific bosses, but just thinking about your experience with bosses that didn't give you that open door, like what were some of the ways that it felt like they shut down communication?
I think the time is a big one, especially
Mhm.
when I was a new social worker. Like, I needed time. I needed someone to process things with. I don't want to say I needed a therapist because my boss wasn't my therapist. I had one of my own because we do the work. And that's something I learned from you was do my own work from the beginning. But time was a big piece. Like, do you have time for me to come to you? Do you have a way for me to get to you if I need you?
Mm,
And then if I come to you with a concern, is the response punitive for me?
mm.
Are you adding more work to my plate or are we walking through the journey together?
That's great advice. Yeah, I can just hearing practice owners really take that. Well, and on your side, I think one of the struggles that a lot of practice owners talk about right now is, I'll just say the dirty word, like a sense of entitlement that people that knew you're nodding your head like, are you experiencing that? Because now you're not a new social worker anymore, and you're probably taking interns and hiring new folks. Like, what are you experiencing now in your spot?
Yeah, I think that the field is changing a little bit in a sense
Yeah.
of it's not uncommon for new social workers to want to jump right into private practice or to want to make more money. And that's not a bad thing in some ways because we all need to make ends meet and we all do really difficult work in our day to day lives. But I think that you can only sell yourself as much as your experience allows. And part of that is knowing your limits. And I don't necessarily think that that's something I see so much. I see a lot of people who
Mm.
are very confident in their skills, and that's not a bad thing as long as you have the ability to support what you're confident in. And I know as a new social worker, I didn't.
Yeah. Well, and that's really funny because when I was an intern, I interned at Harborview Recovery Center. One of the best experiences in my social work career. I will forever be indebted to all of the people that were there that educated me. And Dan Wimsat, one of the therapists at that time, I think it was like literally one of my first days. And he was doing a lecture, and he said to all of the patients there, they were all struggling with substance abuse. And he said, in early recovery, you have to have an equal amount of humility and confidence. Because if you have too much confidence and not enough humility, you're going to go out there and relapse. If you have too much humility, then you're going to be too scared to do the things that you need to do and you're going to relapse. So you need to have a balance of that. And I actually think that's exactly what's needed in new therapist roles too, is that you want to have both. Because if you have enough confidence to go to your boss and say, like, hey, I know I'm good at this. I'm not good at this. Let's work on this. There's that confidence and humility piece that, because you gotta take responsibility for your stuff too. And that's the piece I'm afraid is missing a lot right now. Why do you think that is? Do you have any thoughts, any hypotheses?
On why I think the confidence or the humility is missing.
Yeah, why the humility is missing.
I think that social workers in internships are getting more experience than they were before because we're in a mental health crisis. And so new social workers are being thrown into really difficult situations that they're having to navigate. I know even as an intern, I was thrown into really difficult situations that I don't think I was appropriate to navigate at the time. And now there's a shortage of mental health providers. There's an increase in a need. And so I think that social workers are coming into the field with experiences that make them feel like they've got it. And then you don't know that not everything is a 24/7 crisis, or not everything is going to be black and white, or the worksheets that you were doing that were super successful because your patients were obligated to be there.
Right.
That's not what private practice looks like.
Right.
And so I think that when you take those things away, especially because, let's be honest, a lot of us intern in community mental health or in rehabilitation facilities where patients may have not had other options. They were doing what they had to do. In the private practice world, your insurance can take you anywhere. And so cockiness doesn't serve you without that humility piece of it. And so I think that there's an uptick on one end that needs to be balanced out. And you get there with a manager who will put you where you need to be and remind you of that humility piece.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes as social workers, it's really hard to talk about our own shame. Like, we all have it. We all got into this field for a reason, whether it be shame or trauma or whatever it is. And sometimes I think we need to look back on what made you choose that so that you know, how do you move forward and how do you help?
Right. Well, and the other thing around that I think is interesting, you said before you think the field is changing, and I agree. And I think like we're at a like social justice movement right now where everybody's questioning authority and questioning capitalism and all the institutions, which is great on one level. When that is misconstrued at a small business level, I'm not Jeff Bezos, right? Like, I'm not on the billionaire list, never have been, never will be, do not want to be. And yet it's like there's this questioning of any authority, of any experience right now that seems to be problematic. That's like, it's just like kind of leaked into the wrong places.
So I do see that. And I think that the way we resolve that is we have honest conversations. When I look back on it, what I wish you would have asked me from the get-go is, what do you need from me to be successful?
Yeah.
Because then we could have talked about if you had what I needed at the time, and if I had the skills that I needed. Because part of that is, I don't think that everyone is meant to be the boss to everyone, right? Like, you and I align a lot in how we practice and what we believe and all of those pieces. But does that mean that you were the right boss for me as a new social worker?
Right.
Maybe not. I don't know. But I think that having those conversations from a top-down power perspective of, this is what I can offer. Is this what you need or not?
Yeah.
And then making it okay. Like, not everyone is going to be the right fit for the right practice.
Right.
And that's okay. Just because you're not the right boss for me doesn't mean that I wouldn't be good at my job, and vice versa. Just because I'm not the right social worker therapist for you doesn't mean that you're not an exceptional leader.
Right.
And I think that instead of focusing on filling positions, we need to be focused on fitting positions.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and the other thing that's making me think of too is that just like employees need to be doing their work to make sure they're balancing humility and confidence, practice owners have to be doing that too and being honest with themselves. And when I think back to where I was at that time, I was not honest with myself about what I didn't know. I wasn't honest with myself about my capacity to do all of these things. Cause like, just for like reference for folks, I talked about it in the initial episode of The Burnt Out Practice Owner, that's when I opened an IOP. And so I had tripled my staff literally overnight and did not get the support that I was looking for from my business partner. And so then therefore I was not able to support all of you. And so getting truly honest with ourselves as practice owners is absolutely crucial. And that's also something that I'm not seeing everywhere right now is that level of honesty and self-reflection internally.
Fair. I think it comes down to we all have to do our own work, right? Like we have to know what we bring to the table, and there's confidence in that, right? Like
Yeah.
knowing your skills, but also knowing your areas of weakness. Like what do
Yeah.
you need to work on? What do you need to be better? And how do you get that with either your practice owner, or how does your practice owner get that from you?
Right. Yeah.
Ebb and flow.
Ebb and flow. And the other thing I'm really hearing from you, I think, do you have Libra anywhere important astrologically?
No.
Okay, because you're clearly very relationship driven. I mean, at least that's what I'm hearing out of this is that, you're putting the relationship first and wanting to build communication around trust in that relationship. And not everybody comes to the table with that, both practice owners and employees. So I think that is a big takeaway that I'm hearing.
You want to laugh? I'm Scorpio, Sag, Scorpio. So
That is really interesting. Huh. You got to be like Libra North Node?
maybe, I don't know, but those
Yeah.
are it doesn't necessarily fit always.
No, that's really interesting. Wow. Astrology aside, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you really want to make sure to share with me or to share with anybody who's listening?
I think that conversations like this are healing and they're powerful. And I
Yeah.
wish that we did this more often, not necessarily maybe with practice owners, but in general, I think that I wish I had spoken up sooner. I don't know that it would have changed the outcome for me in the long run because I went on the journey I needed to.
Right.
And I am definitely a better clinician for it now.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe that's the takeaway is difficult conversations are hard. Like, it sucks to tell your boss that you're not getting what you need. And it sucks to feel like you let down someone you care about. And I think that that's something we both have said today. We both have cared about each other and we both felt like we let the other person down. But that's how we move forward and that's how we get better. And just because something didn't work doesn't mean it ends your journey.
Yeah. You're so wise, Jenna.
It's all those bad social work experiences.
Yeah.
No, I have had a lot of really good ones in my journey.
Yeah. Well, and again, to like sort of give you the agency around this, like you have been able to take those bad experiences and apply them, learn from them, and allow them to help you grow. It's like that's the whole concept of the wounded healer for me is like it's not the things that we went with, it's what we do with what we went with and how we show up on the other side of that. And I'm just like so proud of you, dude.
Thank you. What's nice is now I get to do that for others. And
Exactly.
that's the coolest part of my journey is I've been through the rough and now I get to help others through it, both in my work that I do, but also with new social workers. And hopefully they'll have a better journey or a different journey than I did, but mine took me to where I needed to be. So I'll take it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this feels really special. And I am really excited for people to hear this episode. And it feels, I've always been really grateful for the way that you and I navigated everything together. And I feel so honored that you continue to think of me as a support system and a mentor.
Well, you've been there for me when it counted. And even in a hard conversation, we didn't leave the room in a place of negative energy. And I think that that was important. And I'm going to say life-changing because it then filtered how I navigate those difficult conversations now.
I love you.
I love you too.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the conversation and just you and the way you are in the world.
It goes both ways. Thanks for having me and thanks for thinking of this. It was a very healing moment.
I'm so glad. Thanks, Jenna. Thanks for listening to the special Burnt Out Practice Owner series. If you want more information about today's guest, go to our website at www.headheartbiztherapy.com/podcast. Thanks to the Creative Imposter Studios for editing, and I'm your host, Sarah Bueno. Until next time, bye-bye.